The clock was striking close to midnight when Laura locked her front door, feeling the weight of another day without answers. Her small village, nestled in the Romanian mountains, held an unsettling silence, as if the very air carried secrets too impossible to whisper. She lived there with her son Mateus, a boy of just 7, too silent for his age. Since they arrived, something felt different, disturbing, though she couldn't explain why. That night, as Mateus slept, Laura heard a faint whisper coming from the dark hallway. She got up, heart pounding, but there was nothing. Only the living gloom that seemed to stir with a life of its own. In the preceding week, strange phenomena had begun. Objects moved by themselves, shadows darted in the corner of her eyes, and a foul odor would invade Mateus's room, but always vanished before she could pinpoint its source. On one of the coldest autumn days, Laura found a strange mark on her son's neck, a small, almost imperceptible scar that Mateus had never had before. When she asked, he merely smiled, an empty smile, and said it was a gift from the man in the mirror. The boy's expression chilled her. Who was this man? Over the following nights, Laura decided to watch Mateus, sitting on the threshold of his room, a candle flickering between her hands. And then, for the first time, she saw it. A slender figure, pale as a corpse, appearing to be made of cracked glass, with twisted limbs and eyes that glowed with a suffocating red. It leaned over the boy, whispering inaudible words, while Mateus remained motionless, with a lost and absent gaze. Laura nearly lost consciousness but managed to pull her son out of the room. She ran to the kitchen, slamming the door shut behind her, trying to ward off that abominable presence. The figure pounded on the wood, its deformed fingers snapping, before vanishing like smoke. The next day, Laura sought help in the village, but no one took her seriously. Most thought she was overly exhausted or imagining things due to loneliness. The local priest, an older man, said he knew that story. The mirror was an ancient curse, linked to a spirit that stole children's souls and left an empty shell behind. Desperate, Laura decided to seek answers on her own. She visited the village library, rummaged through books in forgotten languages and ancient legends, trying to find a way to save Mateus. She found mentions of a creature called Vidro Morto, an entity that existed between the world of the living and the dead, feeding on the vital essence of victims, especially children, to maintain its spectral form. The following nights were a constant struggle. Mateus began to change. His skin became colder to the touch, his eyes lost their sparkle, and his once soft voice was now a monotonous whisper. Laura tried to talk to him, but he didn't respond, as if an invisible barrier had been erected between them. One morning, Laura heard a noise coming from the attic. She armed herself with a flashlight and went upstairs. The air there was heavy, permeated by a rotten, metallic smell. In the dark corner, she found an old, dusty mirror, covered by a black cloth. When she pulled the cloth away, her reflection seemed distorted, but something else was there. A pair of red eyes stared back at her from the other side of the glass. The Vidro Morto had manifested directly. Before she could flee, the mirror emitted a chilling wave that paralyzed her from within, as if an invisible hand squeezed her heart. She felt her soul being pulled, almost torn from her body, but she fought with all her strength. She screamed, but the house seemed to swallow her voice. In the last instant, Mateus appeared behind her, touching her shoulder, pulling her back to reality. Still, Laura knew the worst was yet to come. The creature was gaining strength, and with each passing day, her son disappeared a little more. Laura decided she couldn't face this alone. The next morning, she sought help in a nearby small town where she heard of a man named Andre, a shadow hunter, someone who dealt with things that shouldn't exist. He lived in an isolated cabin in the forest, and the fame of his interventions was known to only a few. Upon arriving, Laura found Andre to be a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a face marked by old scars. He listened to her story in silence, his eyes fixed while murmuring a few words in an ancient dialect. Afterward, without hesitation, he declared that the Vidro Morto was not a common spirit. It was an ancestral curse. created to imprison souls in its existence between worlds, using the mirror as a portal. We cannot destroy the mirror. It is the key, Andre said. But we can temporarily seal it. The problem is that the creature feeds on Mateus's life, and the curse is spreading, devouring his essence every day. What remains of him is just a shadow, a ghost with skin. Laura felt desperation grow within her. And what can I do to save my son? I can't lose him. Andre replied, there is an ancient but dangerous ritual that involves bringing to light the child's buried memories, the only thing capable of breaking the bond with the Vidro Morto. To do this, he must face the entity in its own dreams and survive. That night, Laura held Mateus in her arms as he slept, knowing that the nightmare was about to begin. The boy entered a deep state, eyes closed but his body tense as if fighting an invisible presence. In the dream world, Mateus found himself in a dark house, with walls covered in dried blood and creaking doors. The Vidro Morto's voice echoed, whispering macabre secrets, trying to bring him down. With each step, shadows emerged to surround him. Distorted figures that looked like human scraps, pieces of the entity's previous victims. Meanwhile, Laura watched in anguish, realizing that her son's mind was in a battle between life and death. She tried to reach him, to speak, but something invisible kept her distant. Suddenly, Mateus found a mirror in the hallway. His reflection seemed distorted, but to his surprise, the reflection began to speak. You are more than just a boy, the image said. You have to remember who you are before I take everything from you. Mateus felt a strength grow within him, a faint light, the memory of his mother's love, of joyful moments. With this energy, he faced the Vidro Morto, which tried to grab him with cold, sharp hands. A scream cut through the silence of the dreams, and then a white flash dominated everything. Laura awoke to a loud sob coming from Mateus's room. He opened his eyes, exhausted but present, as if a huge weight had been lifted. However, the fight wasn't over. Something had changed, yes, but the creature was more enraged. In the days that followed, the village began to be consumed by strange events. People disappeared. Their bodies were later found, mutilated, and without any sign of life or soul. Reports spoke of crawling shadows, figures appearing in windows and mirrors, whispering threats and promises of destruction. Laura, now accompanied by Andre, knew that the Vidro Morto was using Mateus to open a definitive passage to the real world. If this happened, not only her son, but the entire village, and far beyond, would be in danger. It was then that the Shadow Hunter proposed the final step, a direct confrontation with the creature within the spiritual world, a risky ritual that could cost them their lives. That night, Laura and Andre prepared for the ritual that could either permanently seal the Vidro Morto or condemn everything to definitive chaos. They gathered around a circle drawn with sacred plant ashes and ancient symbols carved into the wooden floor of Andre's cabin. Mateus, still fragile, sat in the center, eyes closed, trying to hold firm. Andre began chanting in an almost forgotten language, while Laura held her son's hand, feeling the temperature drop and the air become heavy, as if time itself had stopped. Then, a shadow began to form, growing in size and horror. The Vidro Morto emerged from its ethereal world, ready for the final battle. The creature was a formless mass of eyes, mouths, and hands, each part a cruel reminder of the victims it had claimed. Its smell was that of rotten flesh and oblivion, and its scream, a sound that seemed to tear the very soul of those present. The environment darkened completely, the cabin becoming a limbo between life and death. Mateus, with all his newfound inner strength, tried to hold firm, repeating the words Andre had taught him, invoking his own light to ward off the monster. Laura, between tears and pleas, reminded her son of the love that bound them, and of the world that still needed him. For hours the struggle continued. The Vidro Morto attacked with increasing fury, trying to crush the light Mateus carried. The boy's resistance seemed impossible for someone his age, but he persisted. fighting not only for himself, but for all who had been victims of that curse. At the height of the confrontation, when it seemed the monster would win, a final act of sacrifice from Andre made all the difference. The shadow hunter threw himself between the Vidro Morto and Mateus, using an ancestral amulet that absorbed malignant energies, creating an explosion of light that blinded the creature and forced it to retreat. With a desperate cry, the Vidro Morto was swallowed back into the mirror, which shattered into thousands of pieces, scattering blue sparks through the air. Silence enveloped the place, heavy and deep, as if the world breathed a sigh of relief. But not everything was over. Mateus, though saved, now carried a dark mark on his skin, a reminder that that battle could never be forgotten. Laura knew that peace was temporary and that other entities just as terrifying might be lurking. In the following days, the village tried to rebuild, but fear persisted like an eternal shadow. People who once ignored horror stories began to pay attention to the signs, and a new generation arose, ready to face the unknown, not with fear, but with the strength of what was learned in the darkness. In the remote village of Tsernaya, Siberia, where nights stretched for months, an obscure legend circulated among the residents, the story of the Soul Hunters. It was said that at nightfall, hooded silent figures crossed the forests to take those who dared to venture out after dusk, especially the young. Svetlana, a young botanist who had just arrived to study the region's medicinal plants, did not believe in local superstitions. However, on one of those long winter nights, when the snow seemed to swallow everything, she heard slow, dragging footsteps outside her cabin. Curious and skeptical, Svetlana opened the door to the biting cold and saw a shadow with glowing eyes observing her. The fear she felt was visceral, as if her soul was being analyzed, laid bare by those piercing lights. The shadow did not advance, but its presence was enough to freeze her body. The next morning, residents reported that another young person had disappeared, and the mark of the soul hunters always appeared, a thin black line forming on the victim's neck like an invisible scar that slowly consumed life. Svetlana decided to face her fear and research further, discovering that the hunter's curse was ancestral, born from the legends of the region's ancient peoples who performed rituals to cleanse souls corrupted by sin and fear. Those who escaped, death would never be the same. Their essence remained marked, carrying an emptiness that sucked away happiness and hope. On her last night in the village, Svetlana recorded a disturbing account in her diary. She had seen the shadow again, and this time, she felt an invisible force pulling her into the forest, trying to drag her beyond the world of the living. Fighting with all her might, she managed to return to the cabin, but knew that if she went back there, she might not be so lucky. The legend of the soul hunters remains alive in those frigid confines, a somber reminder that evil can hide in the most subtle details, in the silence, in the gaze, in the shadow that moves among the trees. In the heart of Tanzania, near the dense Udzungwa forest, one of the most terrifying stories circulates among the region's inhabitants. It is the legend of Nyanzoka Matu, the human snake. This is not a simple snake, but a hybrid creature, part human, part reptile, that roams at night hunting those who venture alone into the forest. Juma, a young guardian of the natural reserves, always disbelieved this story until the night his best friend, Mosey, a local guide known for his bravery, disappeared. Mosey had entered the forest to recover lost equipment but never returned. For days, Juma led intense searches but only found strange tracks, marks that seemed human yet with sharp claws, and footprints that distorted from a man's size to something monstrous. On the third night, Juma had his encounter. Returning to camp, he noticed that the shadows danced abnormally and heard a guttural whisper behind the trees. He felt a heavy gaze and then saw a figure emerge from the darkness. Scaly skin reflected the moonlight like cold steel, eyes glowed with a sickly yellow, and a cruel smile revealed a mouth full of sharp teeth. The Nzoka M2 advanced, but Juma managed to escape, though not without deep scars, physical and mental. He says that since that day he carries a mark on his arm that does not heal, as if the snake had implanted a piece of its essence. Those with this mark are destined to disappear, one by one, devoured by the same creature or transformed into its servants, living prey to the reptilian curse. This story is not just a legend for the locals, but a grim warning. The forest holds secrets that should not be disturbed, and the Nzoka M2 is the punishment for those who dare to cross its boundaries without respect. In the end, the fear is not of the monster, but of what it represents: nature's relentless retribution when challenged. Feeling the tension rise? If your heart is already pounding, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and become part of this community that doesn't shy away from fear but faces it head-on. I want to know, which story has left you most uneasy so far? Tell me in the comments the part that sent shivers down your spine, that feeling you can't forget. We'd love to share these experiences with you, because here, fear turns into connection. With this ending that feels torn from the depths of a nightmare, I want to thank you very much for being here with me. If you enjoyed this intense dive into horror, you know what to do. Subscribe to the channel to strengthen our community of the brave, because there's no room here for those who run from the dark. I really want you to share your own supernatural stories, what you've lived, felt, or even dreamed. Let's make this space a network of experiences and learning about the inexplicable. Tell us in the comments what stood out most in this narrative and what you learned or felt while listening to these stories. Every one of your accounts strengthens this current of connection among those who understand that the supernatural is as real as the world we see. Here's my warm invitation. Come back whenever you want to face fear with me, because our journey only ends when the last light goes out. And until then, we'll meet here on the channel, where terror is lived and shared.